Hello everybody, I'm Nicola. I work at Knowsley Safari. I form part of our schools team, and we teach to kind of children that are part of formal education groups, whether that be as part of a school, an after school club, whether that be kids from the same school meeting up in a different kind of environment, maybe an after school community group, just not necessarily associated with the school. But I've come today to talk to you about our Zoo-scription initiative, which is essentially looking at kind of the well-being of the community around us and how we can help have a positive impact on that and on those that are forming part of our community at Knowsley. So with this project, this was a pre-COVID project, so it has gone on to further successes post-COVID, which we'll come on to later on. But just generally talking about Zoo-scription in general, what is it? Why are we aiming to kind of get involved in this sort of thing? So we wanted to look more at kind of our impact on the well-being of people around us, the well-being of those that visit our safari park. What is it that they get out of it? We're an outdoor facility, which was something that was kind of very much highlighted by the pandemic and the lockdown. And it also highlighted the importance of being outside and getting outside. It was something we were already working on pre-COVID, which is where these programs have come from. And we were focusing on how we can facilitate that and how we can create a space where people will come to and people will think of Knowsley Safari when they think of, oh, I really need a break or I need a bit of time out, I need somewhere to kind of step away from whatever it is that's causing me a little bit of stress in my life. So Zoo-scription is essentially the zoo version of a social prescribing mechanism. So we wanted to make sure that we were somewhere that kind of were recommended if people were kind of showing stresses in their life, or they were showing symptoms of stress, symptoms of anxiety, even to a certain point symptoms of depressive episodes and things like that. How can we use our zoo and use our community to make sure that we're connecting those two things and connecting that safari park outdoors feeling good sort of vibes, if you like. So one of the wellbeing initiatives that we had as part of our strategy was kind of to provide that opportunity to come to the safari park and kind of use that open green space and kind of get away from whatever it is that's in their life that's causing them stress, whether that be just by making it more accessible to more of the community, or whether that be running the programs that I'm going to talk about on our slide today. So the first program I'm going to speak about is a program called Move Like Me. Now this formed part of our roadshow outreach. So for those that aren't familiar with the programs that go on at Knowsley, we run a formal education intake, so kind of take schools, take them around the safari park. We offer different workshops, different guided tours. Move Like Me was a roadshow. So through the winter period when we're closed and kind of through downtime, when we're not particularly busy, outside of the summer period, essentially, we would go into schools and deliver workshops for free that were based around different topics other than science. So Move Like Me was a brilliant example of that, because Move Like Me was a PE-based workshop, so kind of a movement and dramatics-based workshop, rather than it focusing purely on science or any of the kind of biology initiatives that we're used to. Now, during this class, essentially the children were moving like animals, moving in a different way. We wanted to create a PE session, a physical, interactive session that was taught in the school hall, and that would essentially mean that the children would get up and move around. And we were hoping that by the end of it, we would affect their perception of exercise and affect essentially how they viewed their PE lessons. So the structure of the session is just on that side of the screen just there. So we started off with a warm-up. It was kind of quite generalised. We moved like different animals to move different parts of our body and warm up certain parts of our body. So we had things like, we moved like meerkats to kind of use our neck and our shoulders. We would do things to move like a frog to warm up parts of our legs and the muscles in our legs. The main part of the session, once we'd done that 15-minute warm-up, was free movement. So essentially what free movement was we would have a discussion in the centre of the room, all as a group, with throwing ideas backwards and forwards of what animals move in an interesting way. We would ask for descriptions of that movement. So if it's a snake, how does it move? Does it wriggle? Does it slide? Does it slither? Getting all of those kind of English targets in and getting them to kind of think about the language that they're using around how different animals move. I would then encourage the children to demonstrate that movement in different ways. So would it be on the floor? Would this animal slither on their belly? Does this animal walk on 2 legs or 4 legs? How can we show that with our bodies? And then also providing different narratives for each animal. So at certain points, we would freeze the movement wherever they were in the room, and we would say, oh, there's a predator approaching, this predator is approaching, or we need to find some food. What food does this animal eat? Where would this animal get its food from? And get them all to collectively move as that physical animal in that story narrative. So kind of giving them that stimulus to think about of how that animal would move. But we then also freeze at the end, bring them back to the centre, refocus all of their imagination back into what the new animal would be, so that we could all move in a different way. And that would then take us to the cool down. So essentially with the cool down, we wanted to make it kind of almost like a mindful moment. We've had an exciting afternoon running around and doing some crazy activities. Let's take a moment now to just kind of focus on our breathing, focus on how we feel, focus a little bit on emotions and how we felt about the session, and then kind of feed that through to the children. So we did a little inside an egg activity is what we called it. So we got the children to curl up into a ball and imagine that they were inside a safe little bubble, a safe little egg. And we kind of discussed different emotions that we were feeling on that day, different emotions we'd felt before and after the session. Now, the struggles with Move Like Me. Sounds like a brilliant session, I'm sure you'll agree. We want to evaluate this session in the same way that it was delivered. So because it was quite a physical movement-based session, we wanted to make sure that that evaluation method didn't jar with that, with handing out pieces of paper or kind of getting them to sit and answer questions before or at the start or at the end of the session. So we wanted to create some form of evaluation that was physical. So the aim of our evaluation at the beginning and end of the sessions was to ask children a series of questions, and then they would run to the faces. As you can see on the slide, they were pinned up on the wall of the sports halls, and they would demonstrate to us how they felt about that particular question. So the questions were things like, how do you feel about exercise? How do you feel about PE? How do you feel today? And just get them to kind of demonstrate how they were feeling based very kind of crudely on these 3 faces that we showed just here. Now, as you can see from our fancy little graph just there, so the green bars show the average score that they gave for each face in the pre-session, so kind of the questions that we asked before the session started, and then the blue bar will show you kind of how they averagely scored after the session when we asked them again. So the questions you can see at the bottom were, how do you feel about exercise? How do you feel about PE sessions? How do you feel right now? And then how do you feel about the session we've delivered or are going to deliver, depending on whether it was pre or post. And as you can see, the results are not particularly promising. The thing we found with this style evaluation, although it was really good to keep that kind of physical energy and momentum up, what it then created was almost like a game-like mentality with the children. So rather than giving a true assessment of how they felt on that day, they were either running to whichever face they thought was the funniest, that was going to make their friends laugh. They were running to whichever face they thought would maybe make us laugh. And it wasn't a true reflection, we felt, of how they felt about the sessions. And as you can see, some of them went in the wrong direction entirely than the direction we wanted. Some of them didn't enjoy PE less after the session that we delivered, which is definitely not what we want to do as part of our outreach programs. So we needed to kind of think about what we were asking the children to do, what it was that we were looking to get from the children in the first place, and how we were going to assess that in a better way next time around. Moving on to the successes then. I mean, as you can tell from these comments that I'm going to pop up on screen here, the teachers seem to think that the children really loved the sessions. There was a couple of teachers that fed back even after we'd left the school a couple of weeks later. They sent us in a little email that was saying that the children were still moving like animals in the playground. It formed part of their kind of downtime, that they were pretending to be an egg, or they were pretending to be a tiger stalking through the classroom or the outside space at playtime. So we did have some impact. It's just not an impact that we measured with our evaluation method using those happy and sad faces. All of the teacher feedback as well was really positive. About 60% of our teachers reported that they thought that they'd seen an improved perception of PE and an improved perception of exercise from these sessions that we had delivered. So it definitely felt like we had had an impact. It just we hadn't measured it quite as well as we would have hoped. This has led to the new version of Move Like Me being created. This was kind of off the back of the first Move Like Me sessions. We took all the feedback that we gained from the teachers from our little feedback form that we sent out to them, and also kind of took into account that sort of mishap, if you will, with the evaluation of the smiley faces and the sad faces. So the new version of Move Like Me is now Move Like Me Expedition Exercise. And as you can see, my lovely colleague Ben smiling away with me in these little photos here. So we wanted to make the session a bit more immersive to kind of get the children really focused. We found with some of the children, they really engaged with that free movement. Some of the children found it quite difficult to focus because there was a lot going on. There was lots of children around them doing movements that were different to their own. So we thought if we focused in and gave it a little more structure, we might be a bit more impactful with what we are trying to do with this session. So it involves a lot more props than it did previously. Previously, it was just myself, Ben, and a speaker for some music in the background. This time, we've got different safari obstacles. So in the centre there, you can see me balancing on the vines that take us across the valley. And on the bottom left, we've also got myself jumping on the stepping stones that take us across the rushing river. So there are lots of things that we have incorporated into this new session that we've learned from the previous session, including kind of broadening out what is it we're trying to kind of get across to the children during these sessions. So not only are we talking about kind of movement and improving that perception of exercise and well-being, we're also looking at interweaving sustainability and conservation aims within the session by making it a bit more structured and by having that special story to it as well. The new method of evaluation that we have taken, we are hoping to do this in the coming months. Pandemic kind of caused us to have a little bit of a break in the centre of our delivery of Move Like Me. We had delivered some pre-pandemic and then everything obviously shut down and the world fell apart. So we are now delivering them in the winter time when we're shut down. So we go to schools during the Mondays and Tuesdays when Knowsley Safari is closed to the public. Now, the new evaluation that we're doing is mainly a teacher feedback form, because we're finding that with this style of workshop, any written feedback from the children tends to jar with the session quite heavily, but also we found in previous years that physical interaction as a method of evaluation doesn't particularly work for gaining those kind of insights and feedbacks that we need. Looking further ahead, we've also got a bit of a deep dive evaluation that we're hoping will have a bit more of an impact by actually physically taking children one by one and having a little chat with them to see if they can tell us a bit more about what they enjoyed about the session and maybe get a bit more information out of them rather than just that semi-passive standing by faces, if you like. The second thing that we initiated pre-COVID was our Safari Wellbeing programme. So we wanted to make sure that we were making an impact with those in the community that maybe didn't have access to our safari, either through anxieties of outdoors or being around other people, or whether it be a financial barrier to getting them into the safari park as well. So we aimed to deliver a programme that kind of supported their health and well-being and enabled them to feel good and function well in their day-to-day lives, as well as during their time at the park. Participants we used, they were accessing mental health support through two charities that we got in contact with, one of which was Mind, which I'm sure we're all very familiar with, and one of them was local to us in St Helens called Chrysalis. All of the ladies that came, they were all female, they came across to us to do a series of programmes, differing in times and differing in lengths to fit around their lives and to fit around kind of what other commitments they had day to day. And the programme was essentially making sure that they explored as much of the zoo as they possibly could, as much of the safari park as we could get them to see, and also get them to do some activities that maybe were a little bit more special, a little bit more VIP, and kind of made them feel a bit better about themselves and a bit better about their outlook on life as well. On the left there is our exciting activity matrix that we did over the 5 weeks. We had 12 participants per cohort, just to try and kind of facilitate that social element. They were all ladies from a similar background. They were all accessing mental health provisions for one reason or another, and they could kind of connect on that basis. And it was that space and that time to sit with each other and just have a chat whilst doing something that was quite fun and quite exciting to do at a safari park. A lot of this involved enrichment or tours of some description with us as educators. So not only are we kind of providing that space for them to relax and have a little bit of a nice day outside of whatever stresses they have during the day, but it also provides kind of social element of they can talk to each other. I can get in those conservation messages. As we're in the zoo anyway, we're in the safari park, we might as well talk about these animals and their kind of impacts that we're having on them. One of the things that we found with Wellbeing is that people don't tend to want to care about, or they don't have the kind of the space mentally to care about some poor animal that's struggling out in the wild if they're having personal internal struggles at home. So one of the reasons we wanted to kind of start up this Safari Wellbeing program was to make sure that we were kind of having that impact on society and having kind of that space where they could come and be themselves and have their well-being positively improved in a way, and making sure that they were also then getting those messages as well. So the struggles that we had with this program, obviously being from the type of group that they are, being from the backgrounds that they have and accessing the provisions that they are accessing, it did mean that a lot of the struggles we were having were with attendance and were with kind of timekeeping and things like that. So obviously stresses outside of life cause us to sometimes not be able to turn up for things all the time, and that did also affect the short and long term evaluation that we did. So we did two types of evaluation on the cohort, which was, as I mentioned, quite a small cohort of 12, small sample size for any kind of evaluation of any sort. We did a short-term and a medium-term evaluation, so one of which was done at the end of every single day that they came to us, and one of which was done at the start of the 5 weeks and at the end of the 5 weeks. So the struggles we found mostly with the medium-term questionnaire. So it was quite difficult to get significant results because of the small participant group that we did have. We ran the cohort twice, and even out of that we got quite a limited return on the forms, either because participants didn't come to both the first and the last week, or maybe they were missing for some weeks in the middle, whatever reason it might be. But 13 out of the 14 statements did show a positive increase, but not any of these were significant. And that is one of the kind of struggles that we have had with Safari Wellbeing. We wouldn't want to do large cohorts because we think that defeats the object of kind of making them feel safe and making them kind of feel a bit special whilst they're here at the safari park. But hopefully this can be overcome by doing repeated sessions. So we have gone through a little bit of a restructure here at the safari as a result of the pandemic. And so this has now been taken over by our wonderful engagement team. They are the other department within Learning and Discovery here at the park, and they will be taking over the Safari Wellbeing groups, so kind of the Mind groups, the Chrysalis groups, and any other mental health charities that are in the area. Successes of the Safari Wellbeing programme then. So the short-term impact statements that we took were based upon these little delightful umbrellas from the UCL's Museum Wellbeing Toolkit. So we use these to indicate how they felt at the start of each session and how they felt at the end of each session. And as you can see from the two little kind of shapes there, one of them measured positive emotions, like feeling active or enthusiastic or excited, and one of them would measure negative emotions, things like upset, distressed, nervous. And we did find that there was a significant increase in average score for all 6 of the positive emotions, which was really good for us. It meant that we clearly had quite a significant impact on those people for that particular day. As you'll see in the comments in just a second when they pop up, there's quite a few comments that refer to the fact that when they're at the safari, they feel quite relaxed. It kind of drains away all of those negative emotions, which is exactly the impact that we wanted to have. Now, there was a significant decrease in the average score for 5 out of the 6 negative emotions. If you're wondering which one wasn't significant, it was the one on the far right there, the upset. That was not a significant difference. Now, we were kind of thinking that, or hoping that that positive impact on the positive emotions and the positive impact on the negative emotions is also hopefully a result of them being here at the safari, a result of them being outdoors, and a result of them kind of getting that access to the animals and to the activities that they wouldn't normally have access to as a regular visitor. And this is our final lesson. So sometimes these kind of new projects, new things are pushing in new directions. They can be quite tiring, as they were for my wonderful colleague Ben. Here are a few pictures of him fast asleep on various PE equipment at several schools that we visited. But it's the lesson to push forward. Things will get better. You will get the sort of impact that you want to have. You are having the impacts that you want to have. It's just how we're measuring it. There might be a slight struggle in the short term, especially post-COVID. That's something we found here at the Safari, is that kind of evaluating those impacts that we're having. We've changed the way that we do it. There are kind of pitfalls, there's lessons all over the place when it comes to evaluation, but keep pushing forwards and you will get some proof that you are having a positive impact. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed our little talks today. I've had the wonderful honour of talking at the conference. I will leave you now. Thank you so much for listening.